They say every city in America has ghosts, but Birmingham's don't whisper, they scream through the flames of furnaces that never should have been built. If you've ever stood near the old Sloss furnaces at night, you know what I mean. The air feels heavy, like it's carrying secrets nobody was ever supposed to hear. And the story you're about to hear, it's the one they tried hardest to bury. Because before Birmingham was even officially a city, before the railroads and steel made it the Pittsburgh of the South, there was blood on the ground. And it began with a man named Brutus Caldwell, a man whose hammer swing would echo across generations. So before we dive in, make sure you hit subscribe and ring that bell, because stories like this don't survive by accident. They were hidden, covered up by men who thought the truth was too dangerous to see the light of day. And I want you to tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? Because what happened here in Alabama could have happened anywhere. Progress was built on human suffering. The night the skull split. It was the winter of 1858. Cold air rolled through the valleys of Jefferson County, but inside the Sloss Ironworks the heat was enough to peel skin. Fire roared inside the furnaces, sparks floating like dying stars. Men coughed through black smoke, their lungs burning with every breath. And then it happened. Witnesses swore the sound carried over the fire and the roar of machines, the wet, heavy crack of a skull splitting wide open. A sound that would follow them into their dreams for years. Brutus Caldwell, a 6'3" giant of a man, had swung his 20-pound sledgehammer, not at iron ore, not at stone, but at the head of his master. The man's skull burst like a melon dropped from a church steeple. Blood gushed so fast it hissed and steamed against the superheated metal floor, making a sound like snakes writhing in fire. 17 men saw it. 17 men heard it. 17 men would never forget it. But what came after wasn't just a killing. It was a conspiracy, one so twisted and dangerous that Birmingham's richest men would spend the next half-century burying it under molten iron, smoke, and silence. The rise of Sloss Ironworks. To understand why Brutus did what he did, you have to understand the world he lived in. Back in 1858, Birmingham wasn't even a city yet, it wouldn't be founded until 1871. But the land was already cursed. Jefferson County was sitting on a geological gold mine, iron ore, coal, and limestone, all side by side, waiting to be pulled from the earth and melted into fortune. The Cherokee had once called these valleys sacred. Their burial grounds still dotted the hills. But white settlers saw something different, an empire of iron. And at the heart of that empire was one man, Cornelius Sloss. Sloss wasn't tall, just 5'6", but he had ice-blue eyes and the kind of ambition that made him dangerous. Where most southern planters still clung to cotton and tobacco, Sloss dreamed of fire and steel. He had come down from Pennsylvania with northern industrial secrets in his head and southern cruelty in his heart. His business model was simple: work slaves until they dropped, then replace them. To Sloss, people were just fuel for his furnaces, no different than coal. His foundries burned hotter than hell itself, more than 2,000 degrees, and men toiled 16 hours straight in that inferno. The death rate, triple that of plantation slaves. But to Sloss, it didn't matter. Human life was cheap. Iron was priceless. The arrival of Brutus Caldwell. That spring of 1855, a wagon rolled into the Sloss compound carrying a new slave. Brutus Caldwell. He'd been bought for $1,200 from a failing Virginia plantation, a high price, but worth every penny for a man his size. He was a monster of muscle. Broad shoulders, hands like dinner plates, scars from whips and burns crisscrossing his copper-colored skin. But it wasn't his body people remembered, it was his eyes. Dark, watchful, patient, like a man who was adding up debts and waiting for the day he'd collect. Brutus was assigned to the sledge gang. Their job was to smash raw ore into smaller pieces before it hit the furnaces. The hammers weighed 20 pounds, and most men could last 6 hours before their arms gave out. 8, if they were exceptional. Brutus worked 10, every day, without slowing. The clang of his hammer became the heartbeat of the foundry. Boom, crack. Boom, crack. Boom, crack. Other workers timed themselves to his rhythm. It was steady, mechanical, unstoppable. What nobody realized was that every swing was practice. Practice for something far more dangerous than breaking ore. The change in Brutus. By December of 1858, people started noticing something strange. Brutus, who usually kept quiet, began asking questions. Where the overseers were at certain hours. Which corners of the foundry were least guarded. Which paths out of the camp were hidden. He started meeting people in the shadows. Mysterious figures slipping through the woods before dawn, leaving him with papers, packages, even coins. Slaves whispered about it, but none dared speak too loud. And then there was the notebook. Samuel Hutchins, a fellow worker, swore he saw Brutus scribbling in it at night by candlelight. Columns of names, numbers, records. When Samuel asked him about it, Brutus just said, "Greater than, a man's gotta keep track of debts. Someday, somebody's gonna have to pay." That notebook vanished after the killing. Authorities searched everywhere but found nothing. What was written in those pages? Nobody ever found out. The foreshadowing. But everyone felt the change. The hammer that once beat like a drum of survival now sounded like a countdown. And on December 15, 1858, the countdown hit 0. The hammer came down, and Birmingham would never be the same. Fire. End of part 1. If you want to know what Brutus's plan really was, and the dark secret that still haunts the ruins of Birmingham's furnaces, you won't want to miss part 2. So hit that like button, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, do you believe places can hold curses? Or are they just echoes of the people who suffered there? The Iron Curse of Birmingham. Part 2, The Hammer of Justice. If you thought part 1 was disturbing, buckle up, because what happens next isn't just murder. It's revelation. It's the kind of horror that makes you wonder how much of America's progress was built on secrets too dark to ever be taught in schools. When Brutus Caldwell lifted that sledgehammer in 1858, he didn't just split open the skull of Cornelius Sloss. He cracked open the rotten foundations of Birmingham's iron empire. And what spilled out was worse than blood. The pressure cooker. December in Alabama brings a strange mix of heat and cold. Inside the Sloss furnaces, fire raged at full blast, filling the air with choking smoke. But outside, frost crept over the windows and iron railings, creating slick patches of ice that had already claimed lives. Workers slipped into molten metal. Men collapsed from exhaustion and were trampled because no one could stop the pace, not even for a dying comrade. The foundry was hell, and December made it worse. Cornelius Sloss, the Iron King himself, was feeling the heat too. He had promised a massive shipment of railroad iron before Christmas, and failure wasn't an option. Pressure rolled downhill, as it always does, crushing the slaves beneath it. Brutus Caldwell was watching, counting, waiting. The general arrives. At exactly 3:17 in the afternoon, Sloss made his daily inspection. He strutted across the foundry floor like a general reviewing troops, silk shirt from France, boots polished to a gleam, hickory cane in hand. Everyone hated those inspections. Sloss didn't just look for mistakes, he created them. If he saw a worker move too slow, he'd lash them with that cane. He remembered grudges. He punished men for things that happened years before. But today was different. Sloss wasn't alone. 2 strangers in clean clothes followed him, well-dressed men carrying leather portfolios, businessmen who didn't belong in the furnace smoke. Were they investors, inspectors, buyers? No one knew. The tension on the floor thickened. Something was about to snap. The walk toward death. Sloss stopped near furnace number 3 and began berating a slave named Samuel for working too slowly. His voice carried like a whip. And then, silence. The clang of Brutus's hammer stopped. Workers turned their heads. Brutus had set down his chunk of ore. He picked up his 20-pound sledgehammer, and with calm, deliberate steps, he walked toward his master. Witnesses later said they knew, in that moment, what was coming. But fear froze them in place. "Mr. Sloss," Brutus said. His voice was steady, almost respectful. "I got something for you, sir." Sloss turned, and for the first time anyone could remember, fear flickered across his face. Not surprise, not annoyance, real fear. His pale blue eyes went wide. His cane shook. "What do you want?" Sloss demanded, but his voice cracked like a frightened boy. Brutus raised the hammer. The red glow of the furnaces caught its steel head, and for one terrifying moment it looked like a weapon forged in hell itself. Brutus's shoulders squared. He seemed to grow taller, as though every enslaved soul who had ever suffered in those furnaces stood with him. "Justice," Brutus said, and he brought the hammer down. Dash dash dash. The skull splits. The sound was sickening, a wet, explosive crack, louder than the roar of the furnaces. Sloss collapsed, blood gushing, brain matter splattering across the iron floor. The blood steamed and hissed where it touched the hot metal, filling the air with the stench of burning flesh. But Brutus didn't stop. He swung again, and again, and again. Witnesses later swore the sound of bone breaking haunted their dreams for years. Men vomited where they stood. Some prayed, others just froze, unable to believe what they were seeing. By the time it was over, there was nothing left of Cornelius Sloss's head but a ruinous mess of bone and flesh. Brutus set the hammer down carefully. He turned to the stunned crowd and spoke with the same calm dignity he always had. "Somebody better send for the sheriff. I'll be waiting right here." Dash dash dash. The arrest. 2 hours later, Sheriff Thomas Whitfield arrived with 12 armed men. They expected chaos, slaves rioting, maybe more bodies. Instead, they found perfect order. The furnaces were still roaring. The workers were still working, their faces blank. And Brutus Caldwell sat quietly on a wooden crate, hands folded, waiting like a man in church. When the sheriff asked why, Brutus's answer chilled everyone present. "I killed Cornelius Sloss. I did it deliberate, and I'd do it again. I got no regrets. But if you want to know why, ask his ledgers. Ask his books. Ask why 43 people went away from here and never came back." Dash dash dash. The ledgers of hell. Sheriff Whitfield searched Sloss's office. What he found was worse than anything Brutus could have described. Meticulous ledgers, charts, letters, records that treated human beings as experiments. Sloss had documented everything: how long a man could work without food before collapsing, how little sleep a body could survive on, which punishments motivated best. He tracked families, measuring how much harder men worked when their children were threatened. It was torture disguised as management science. And then came the letters. Cornelius Sloss had been corresponding with Dr. Josiah Knott of Mobile, a respected physician, a man whose theories on racial medicine were cited across the South to defend slavery. Sloss had been selling him slaves. Not just selling, supplying subjects for medical experiments. The letters detailed horrors: surgeries without anesthesia, deliberate infections, experiments designed never to let their victims return alive. Each body fetched up to $500. And Sloss had provided dozens. Those missing 43, they hadn't escaped. They had been delivered into hell in the name of science. Dash dash dash. The cover-up. Sheriff Whitfield understood the weight of what he held. Exposing it would destroy powerful men and shake the very foundations of slavery. So he made a choice. The official report claimed Cornelius Sloss had been murdered by Brutus Caldwell, for reasons unknown. The ledgers were confiscated, the letters burned. But not all of them. Whitfield, torn between justice and survival, hid copies of the most damning papers in a tin box beneath his home. A secret for some future reckoning. Proof that 43 souls had been stolen, tortured, and erased. Dash dash dash. The trial approaches. And so, when Brutus Caldwell's trial began in January 1859, the official story was simple: one slave, one hammer, one killing. No conspiracy, no missing people, no experiments. But the truth was still out there, buried in those hidden papers. And some say that truth, and the souls of those 43, still haunt Birmingham's furnaces to this day. Dash dash dash. Fire. End of Part 2. Brutus's trial would become one of the most controversial in Alabama's history, not for what was said in the courtroom, but for what was left unsaid. Make sure you're subscribed, because in Part 3 we step into that courtroom, where the real horror begins. The Iron Curse of Birmingham. Part 3: The Trial of Brutus Caldwell. If you thought the hammer was the end of the story, you're wrong. The real nightmare wasn't Cornelius Sloss's death, it was what happened next. Because in 1859, Birmingham held a trial unlike any in Alabama's history. A trial that revealed not just one man's rage, but the darkness of an entire system. The town in shock. News of the killing spread faster than wildfire. By nightfall, the streets of Birmingham buzzed with gossip. Some whispered Brutus Caldwell had lost his mind. Others said he was possessed. But among the enslaved workers, a different story spread. They called him a hero. They said Brutus had done what no one else dared, he struck down the Iron King himself. Still, fear gripped everyone. Would there be a massacre? Would the army be called in to crush the workers? Men slept with guns under their pillows. Women prayed over their children. The furnaces roared on, but Birmingham was no longer just an iron town. It was a powder keg. The courtroom opens. On January 12, 1859, the Jefferson County Courthouse filled to bursting. White men in tailored suits claimed the front rows. Behind them stood farmers, merchants, and workers who had never set foot in such a trial before. And in the very back, pressed together, were the enslaved. They weren't allowed to speak. But their eyes never left the man in chains at the front. Brutus Caldwell. He stood tall, wrists shackled, his broad shoulders unbent. Unlike most men brought to trial, he didn't bow his head. He didn't look broken, he looked calm, almost defiant. The judge and jury. Judge Abram Gibbons presided, a stern man with a reputation for siding with planters and ironmasters. He had little patience for theatrics. The jury, 12 white men, merchants, overseers, plantation owners. Not one of them would have ever shaken hands with a man like Brutus Caldwell. Everyone in that courtroom knew what the verdict was supposed to be. Guilty. Swiftly. Publicly. But then Brutus spoke. The confession that wasn't. When asked for his plea, Brutus didn't hesitate. I killed Cornelius Sloss, he said. His voice was steady, deep, carrying across the silent room. I killed him because he was a monster. Because 43 souls cried out for justice. And because God himself would not let me rest until I raised that hammer. Gasps filled the room. The judge pounded his gavel for silence. But Brutus wasn't done. He looked at the jury. Don't pretend you don't know what went on in those furnaces. Don't pretend you didn't hear the screams at night. Men disappeared, and you asked no questions. But I asked. I counted. And I found the truth. The prosecutor objected, but the damage was done. The crowd murmured, restless. The truth was too dangerous to ignore. The missing witness. Sheriff Whitfield had promised himself he wouldn't bring the ledgers to court. He had burned most of the letters, locked the rest in his tin box. But Brutus's words made people curious. Was there really proof? That night, someone broke into Whitfield's home. The tin box was gone. By morning, rumors spread like smoke, the papers had survived. And if they surfaced in court, the whole Iron Empire could burn. Voices from the shadows. On the second day of the trial, a surprise witness appeared. A thin, trembling boy named Eli, no older than 16, who had worked in the furnaces. His voice cracked as he spoke, but the words silenced the entire room. They took my brother, Eli said. Said he was sold downriver. But I seen him dragged to the wagon at night. Mr. Sloss gave him to a doctor. My brother never come back. The judge tried to strike the testimony. But the jury had heard it. And once words like that are spoken, you can't erase them. The jury shifts. For the first time, some of the jurors looked uneasy. Men who had walked into court ready to hang Brutus now shifted in their seats, sweat beading on their foreheads. Because if what Eli said was true, then Cornelius Sloss hadn't just been a victim. He had been a villain. And if Brutus was telling the truth, then maybe that hammer wasn't murder. Maybe it was justice. The threat outside, but not everyone wanted justice. Each night, angry whispers spread through the taverns. Businessmen warned that if Brutus lived, others might rise up. that if the truth about the ledger spread, the furnaces would empty and fortunes would vanish. By the third day of trial, men rode into Birmingham from surrounding towns, rifles slung over their shoulders. They called themselves the Iron Guard. Their plan was simple: if the court wouldn't kill Brutus, they would. The closing argument. The prosecutor's words were sharp, but the crowd barely listened. Everyone was waiting for Brutus's last chance to speak. When it came, he didn't beg for mercy. He didn't apologize. He looked at the jury, then at the people in the back, his people. And he said, "I was born a man, not a slave. But this land made me chains." Cornelius Sloss fed those chains with blood. If killing him was a crime, then let the crime stand. But know this: his evil does not die with me. It is still here, and it will haunt every man who turns his face from the truth. The silence afterward was heavier than the furnaces, smoke. The verdict, delayed. The jury left the room. An hour passed, then 2, then 3. By sunset, they still hadn't returned. The crowd grew restless. The Iron Guard outside grew louder. And when the jurors finally came back, the foreman's face was pale. He looked at the judge, then at Brutus, then at the mob outside. "We cannot agree," he stammered. A mistrial. Brutus Caldwell was not free. But he was not condemned either. He would live to stand trial again. The horror isn't over. That night, the Iron Guard made their move. Torches lit the dark streets. Boots pounded the courthouse steps. And the sheriff's men braced for war. Inside his cell, Brutus Caldwell sat alone. He closed his eyes, whispered a prayer for the 43 souls who never came home, and waited. Because sometimes, the true horror doesn't happen in the courtroom. It happens in the streets outside. Fire. End of part 3. The mob was gathering. The ledgers were missing, and the furnaces of Birmingham were about to run red again. Stay tuned for part 4, The Night of Fire. The Iron Curse of Birmingham. Part 4, The Night of Fire. If you thought the trial was terrifying, wait until you hear what happened after. Because justice wasn't decided inside the courthouse, it was decided in the streets. And that night, Birmingham burned. The mob awakens. The mistrial had left the town divided. Some whispered Brutus was innocent. Others hissed he was a devil in human skin. But the Iron Guard didn't care about trials or juries. They believed only in iron and fire. And that night, they gathered with torches, muskets, and ropes, ready to deliver their own verdict. Sheriff Whitfield tried to hold them back. His deputies blocked the courthouse doors. But against 200 armed men, how long could they last? Inside his cell, Brutus heard the roar of voices, heard the pounding fists, smelled the smoke, and he knew the night was coming for him. The bell of doom. At midnight, the church bell rang, not for prayer, but as a signal. It was the Iron Guard's call. Torches lit up the streets like veins of fire. The courthouse windows glowed orange. Women peeked from shutters, clutching their children. Men locked their doors, knowing they couldn't stop what was coming. The mob wasn't just after Brutus. They wanted to erase the truth. The ledgers. The boy Eli. Anyone who dared speak against Cornelius Sloss's name. This wasn't justice. It was slaughter waiting to happen. The break-in. The courthouse doors shuddered as the mob rammed them with a wagon wheel. The hinges screamed. Deputies fired warning shots, but the bullets only enraged the crowd. "Bring out the hammer man," they shouted. "Bring us Brutus." The iron bars of Brutus's cell rattled with each blow against the front doors. But he didn't move, didn't beg, didn't pray for mercy. Instead, he whispered to himself, "If this is the end, let it be an end worth remembering." The mysterious fire. Then it happened. No one knows who struck the first spark. Some say it was a torch tossed carelessly. Others claim someone inside lit it on purpose. But suddenly, the courthouse roof was on fire. Flames crawled across the wooden beams. Smoke poured from the windows. The mob roared in confusion. Deputies scrambled. People scattered in the streets. And through the chaos, the fire raged higher, like the furnaces had come alive in the very heart of town. The cell door opens. Sheriff Whitfield coughed through the smoke as he fumbled with the keys. He unlocked Brutus's cell and shoved him forward. "Go," the sheriff barked. "If you stay, they'll kill you here and now. Maybe the fire will cover your escape." Brutus stared at him, stunned. "You'd let me walk free?" Whitfield's eyes burned red from smoke. "I ain't doing it for you. I'm doing it because there's more at stake than your neck. Those ledgers, those papers, they can't vanish. Too many people already know." Brutus hesitated only a second. Then he nodded. He ran. The streets of chaos. Birmingham was a nightmare. The courthouse was an inferno. The mob scattered like ants, their torches swallowed by fire. Some tried to chase Brutus, but the smoke blinded them. Others shouted they saw a demon running in the flames. Children cried in the alleys. Horses bolted in panic. Church bells clanged wildly as if the whole town was warning itself, "The curse has come alive." Brutus sprinted through the smoke, his chains still clanging around his wrists. He vanished into the dark woods beyond the town, leaving behind nothing but fear and fire. The price of escape. By dawn, the courthouse was a blackened ruin. Half the iron guard were dead or missing. Some said they burned, others said they vanished in the smoke. But the strangest part, Brutus's chains were found on the ground outside town, melted. As if no blacksmith on earth could have forged them. And with him gone, whispers grew darker. Some swore Brutus was no man at all, but a spirit of vengeance. A shadow sent to punish Birmingham. But for the enslaved workers, the story was different. They said Brutus was still alive, carrying the truth into the wilderness. Waiting for the right time to strike again. The ledgers resurface. A week later, a bundle of charred papers appeared on the steps of a church. Not all the pages survived, but enough remained to tell the horror. Names of the missing, dates of their disappearance, payments made for bodies. The price of blood turned into iron. The town tried to hush it, tried to burn the papers again. But copies spread, passed in secret, whispered at night, and once a story like that takes root, you can't kill it. The curse deepens. The furnaces never stopped burning. But something changed. Workers said they saw shapes in the flames, heard voices in the smoke. Some claimed Brutus's hammer still rang in the night, even though he was gone. The owners laughed it off. But fewer men wanted to work at the furnaces. The iron still flowed, but so did the fear. Because the people of Birmingham began to believe something terrible. That the fire itself had taken sides. The unfinished tale. Brutus had vanished. The iron guard was broken. The courthouse was gone. But this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Because the curse of Birmingham wasn't bound to one man, or one trial, or even one fire. It was spreading, waiting, growing stronger in the ashes. And soon, the night of fire would return. Fire. End of part 4. Brutus has escaped. The ledgers have survived. And now the curse has begun to live inside the flames themselves. Next. Part 5. The Hammer returns. The Iron Curse of Birmingham. Part 5. The Hammer returns. Some curses die with the man who carries them. But this one, it didn't end with Brutus Caldwell. Because after the fire, after his escape, after the courthouse burned to ash, strange things began to happen in Birmingham. Things that made people whisper, "The hammer has returned." The first strike, it began 3 weeks after the courthouse fire. A furnace worker named Reuben Harker went missing on the night shift. When his co-workers searched for him at dawn, all they found was his hammer, split clean in two, like it had been struck by lightning. The foreman swore he heard pounding in the night, louder than the furnaces, echoing through the valley. But when he went to check, no one was there. By morning, word spread, Reuben was gone. Another soul swallowed by the fire. And that was just the beginning. The children's whispers. Children in town started a game. They called it, the blacksmith's knock. At night, they'd tap 3 times on the walls of their homes and wait. If they were brave, they'd listen for the 4th knock, the one no human hand ever made. Parents scolded them, said it was nonsense. But then one boy vanished after the game. His bed was empty, his window wide open, And on the windowsill, black ash shaped like a hammerhead. The parents stopped calling it nonsense after that. The survivors speak. A few men swore they saw him. Not Brutus as he was, chained and broken, but something else. A giant shape in the smoke. Shoulders broad as the furnace stacks. Eyes glowing like molten iron. And always, carrying a hammer. They said he didn't speak. He just walked through the flames, leaving behind scorched footprints too large to be human. The bosses laughed it off. Drunken fools, they said. But the missing workers, the melted tools, the charred footprints, those weren't jokes. The return of the ledgers. One night, the preacher found another package on the steps of his church. Inside were more papers, fresh pages, not charred. Pages that no one could explain. Names of men who hadn't even disappeared yet. Dates that hadn't come to pass. It was a ledger of the future. And the first name on the list was the preacher's own son. Terrified, the preacher tried to burn the papers. But they wouldn't burn. The fire curled around them, licked at them, but the pages stayed untouched. And the next week, his son was gone. The hammer in the hills. Farmers living near the outskirts began reporting sounds from the hills. At dusk, when the sun bled into the smokestacks, they heard it, metal striking metal. The sound of a hammer. Slow, steady, relentless. But when they searched, there was nothing. No forge, no tools. Just the echo of something working in the dark, as if an unseen hand was forging iron that no man could see. And every time the hammer rang, someone else disappeared. The Iron Guard's revenge. The survivors of the Iron Guard, the same men who once hunted Brutus, banded together again. They claimed they'd track him down, once and for all. They carried rifles, lanterns, and chains. They swore they'd find his hideout in the hills. But only one man returned. His hair had gone white overnight. His eyes were hollow, staring, like he'd looked into something no man should ever see. He kept repeating the same words until the day he died. The hammer never misses. The hammer never misses. The Black River incident. The river that carried slag and waste from the furnaces turned blacker than ever before. One morning, fishermen pulled up nets heavy with bones, human bones, cracked and burned, fused with iron. No one could explain it. No one dared. But when the current slowed, people swore they saw a shadow in the water, dragging chains, its hammer rising and falling in rhythm with the flow. The town tried to ignore it. But you can't ignore a river of bones. The new curse. Birmingham had become a haunted city. Furnace owners doubled wages, but fewer and fewer men showed up to work. Families fled. Streets emptied at dusk. Churches overflowed with prayers that no one believed would be answered. And still, the hammer rang. They said you could hear it miles away, echoing through the valleys, through the hills, through the very bones of the earth. And those who heard it closest never lived long enough to tell the tale. The last warning. On a stormy night, lightning struck the tallest smokestack. It didn't crumble. It didn't fall. Instead, the iron glowed red hot, like it had been forged anew. And on its blackened surface, townsfolk swore they saw marks, hammer strikes, burned into the metal itself. No man could have climbed that stack in the storm. No man could have left those blows. But the message was clear. The hammer was back, and it wasn't finished. Fire. End of part 5. The curse has grown beyond Brutus himself. The hammer is no longer in his hands. It's something larger, something supernatural, something tied to the very iron of Birmingham. Next. Part 6. The Devil in the Smoke. Part 6. The Devil in the Smoke. Some towns are built on stone, others on soil. But Birmingham, it was built on blood, sweat, and something far darker. And by the summer after the courthouse fire, people began whispering that Birmingham wasn't cursed by Brutus Caldwell anymore. No, the curse had grown beyond him. They said something else had stepped through the flames. Something older, something waiting in the smoke. The smoke that wouldn't leave. After the courthouse burned, the sky over Birmingham never cleared. Day or night, a gray haze lingered. Children coughed. Mothers kept wet rags over their windows. Even the rain that fell came down black and bitter, staining clothes and skin like ash. At first, folks blamed the furnaces. Too much coal, too much iron, the bosses said. But old miners shook their heads. That ain't coal smoke, one muttered. That's hell breath. And the strange thing, the smoke moved. Some nights it curled low through the streets, wrapping around doorways and slipping through cracks. People swore it knocked before entering, a slow, heavy knock, like a hammer at the door. Those who opened up never came out again. The faces in the fog. One morning, schoolchildren walking to class stopped dead in their tracks. In the mist above the street, they saw shapes. Not clouds, not tricks of the light, but faces. Twisted, screaming faces. Dozens of them, drifting in the haze. Some looked like men who had disappeared from the furnaces. Others looked ancient, worn, burned into the smoke itself. The children screamed and ran. The teacher tried to calm them, saying it was just fog. But when she turned back, one face remained. It was her husband's, and he'd been missing for weeks. The bargain in the church. The preacher, desperate after his son vanished, called a midnight gathering inside the old Baptist church. Families huddled in pews, clutching Bibles. Candles flickered, but the smoke seeped in through the cracks, curling along the floor like snakes. The preacher slammed the pulpit. "We're not fighting a man anymore," he said. "This is the devil himself." He begged the crowd to pray harder, sing louder, drown the evil out. But as the hymns rose, the smoke thickened. The organ groaned, playing notes no human hand touched. And above the preacher's head, letters formed in soot against the rafters. "Pay what is owed." By dawn, half the congregation had fled Birmingham for good. The legend of the Devil's Forge. That summer, rumors spread of a hidden forge in the hills. Hunters said they saw fire glowing deep inside the mountain caves at night, brighter than any lantern. They heard hammers pounding, steady and slow, like the heartbeat of the earth itself. Some swore they saw a figure inside, taller than a man, shoulders broad as iron doors, with eyes like coals. They said he wasn't forging tools, or horseshoes, or chains. He was forging souls. Every missing worker, every lost child, every name on that cursed ledger. They weren't gone. They were melted down, hammered, beaten into something new, and whatever was being built in that forge wasn't meant for this world. The devil's mark. Soon, strange marks began appearing around town. On the side of barns. On furnace doors. Even carved into trees. It looked like a blacksmith's hammer, crossed with a crown of smoke. Men tried to scrape it off, paint over it, burn it. But the marks always returned, darker, deeper, carved into the very iron and wood itself. And every time the mark appeared on a door, someone inside that house disappeared within the week. The doctor's warning. The town doctor, a man named Elias Monroe, studied the strange sickness spreading through Birmingham. People were coughing up soot, spitting blood as black as coal. But when he examined the blood under his lamp, he saw something that froze him cold. The black wasn't coal, it was iron, tiny shards of iron. It was as if the smoke was changing people, fusing them from the inside out. He tried to warn the mayor, but before he could share his notes, the doctor vanished. His journal was found later in the street, pages burned, with just one word scrawled over and over. Forged. The night of the bells. On the last Sunday of July, the church bells began to ring in the middle of the night. No one was pulling the ropes. No one was inside. The sound was deafening, clang after clang, like a hammer striking an anvil. The smoke rolled thicker with every peal, swallowing the streets until people could barely see their own hands. When the bells stopped, silence fell. And in that silence, the whole town heard it at once. Breathing. Slow. Heavy. Steady. Like something enormous was standing just beyond the smoke, watching. The pact remembered. An old woman, known as Granny Harlow, finally spoke up. She said this curse wasn't just about Brutus or the furnaces. She claimed Birmingham's founders had struck a bargain long ago, blood for iron, souls for wealth. Every nail, every rail, every furnace flame, she whispered, was bought with a price. And the devil has come to collect. Most folks laughed her off. But the older men, the miners who dug the first pits, went pale. They remembered the strange chants whispered by the foreman, the offerings of blood poured into the first smelting fires. Maybe Granny Harlow was right. Maybe Birmingham was never meant to be free. The devil in the smoke. One August evening, as the sun set behind the iron stacks, the smoke gathered thicker than ever. It didn't drift. It didn't scatter. It stood up, rising higher than the rooftops. It took the shape of a man, or something like one. Broad shoulders, a bent back, eyes glowing like molten coals. And in its hand, it held a hammer. The ground shook as it raised the weapon high. People ran, mothers clutched children, men grabbed rifles that wouldn't fire. And then, the hammer fell, not on the ground, not on a man, but on the town itself. Windows shattered, doors split, the furnaces roared higher than ever before, flames leaping into the sky as if the earth itself had cracked open. And the smoke whispered through the streets, in 100 voices at once. The debt is not paid. Fire. End of part 6. The curse has fully revealed itself, no longer tied to one man, but to a deal made long before, with something infernal claiming its payment. Next. Part 7 The Vanishing Town. The Iron Curse of Birmingham. Part 7 The Vanishing Town. Every town leaves a mark on a map. But one August morning, Birmingham began to erase itself. Not in ink, not in history books. In reality. The empty streets. It started with silence. Folks woke to find Main Street deserted. Horses stood tied to posts, but no riders. Fresh loaves sat cooling in the bakery window, but no baker. Doors hung open, rocking in the summer breeze. An entire row of houses stood still and lifeless. No sound of babies crying. No smell of breakfast cooking. Just nothing. It was as if families had been swallowed whole in the night. And the strangest part, the smoke was thicker on those streets, curling in and out of windows like it owned the place. The sheriff's ride. Sheriff Dalton saddled his horse and rode hard down the empty lane, calling names he knew. Bill, Mary, Sam. No answer. Just the steady hiss of smoke slipping between shutters. He kicked open doors, one after another. Beds still warm, meals half eaten, even a lantern still burning on a nightstand. But no people. When he reached the last house, he found a note pinned to the door. The paper was scorched black around the edges, but the words remained. "We are not gone. We are taken." Dalton dropped the note, mounted his horse, and fled, the smoke chasing his heels like wolves. The mines awake. By nightfall, the ground began to shake again. The old mines, long abandoned, started breathing smoke. Thick, rolling clouds poured out, carrying with them the sound of chains rattling deep underground. People swore they heard voices echoing up from the pits. Men singing in a rhythm, like miners at work. But no living soul had stepped into those shafts in years. Granny Harlow spat into the dirt. "They're not digging for coal no more," she whispered. "They're digging for us." The town that faded. The next morning, something even stranger happened. A traveler passing through claimed Birmingham wasn't even there anymore. From the hills above, he said, he saw nothing but empty forest where the town should have been. No rooftops, no smokestacks, just trees and dirt. But when he walked closer, the buildings flickered back into sight, like a ghost stepping out of the mist. And when he left town again, it vanished behind him. It was as if Birmingham was slipping in and out of existence, being pulled into another world piece by piece. The whispers in iron. Blacksmiths tried to keep their forges burning, but their iron turned strange. Every horseshoe, every rail, every nail they hammered carried a whisper. Not loud, but steady. At first, the whispers were random. But soon, they formed words. "Come closer. One more strike. Join us." One smith, terrified, threw his work into the river. But the water boiled black, and the iron floated back upstream, glowing red as if pulled by invisible hands. From then on, no one dared strike the anvil after dark. The children taken. Nothing hit harder than the children. One night, a group of boys played marbles under a lantern on a porch. Their laughter carried through the smoke. Then, in the blink of an eye, silence. The lantern still glowed. The marbles still lay scattered across the wood. But the boys were gone. Their parents screamed into the night, searching every inch of street and field. Only one clue remained, a trail of tiny, sooty handprints leading straight into the black fog. And then, gone. The doctor's return. Weeks earlier, Drive, Elias Monroe had disappeared, but now, he returned. Or at least, something wearing his face did. He staggered into town, clothes torn, skin pale, eyes glowing faintly red like burning embers. In his hand, he carried his old medical bag. But when the sheriff tried to speak to him, the doctor's mouth opened, and smoke poured out, hissing like steam. The crowd backed away in terror as his body convulsed, bones cracking, skin splitting. And then, just as suddenly, the figure collapsed into a heap of black ash. Inside his medical bag was a single piece of iron, shaped like a human heart. The vanishing ledger. One night, the mayor unlocked his safe to destroy the cursed Caldwell ledger once and for all. But when he pulled it out, the book was blank. Every name, every number, every word had vanished. And on the first page, written in blood-red ink, was a new line. The town itself is owed. The ringing chains. As August drew to a close, the town couldn't sleep. Every night, the sound of chains rattled through the streets, not just from the mines, but from every wall, every chimney, every iron gate. It was as if invisible prisoners were marching right through Birmingham, dragging their shackles behind them. And if you listened closely, too closely, you could hear their voices. Crying, begging, screaming for release. But the smoke only laughed. The vanishing town. Then, on the last night of summer, Birmingham began to vanish for real. One street, then another. Houses faded into mist, their outlines dissolving like ink in water. Families grabbed what they could and ran, but even as they fled, the ground beneath them blurred, their footprints erased. Sheriff Dalton watched as the courthouse flickered, the bell tower ringing once before it, too, dissolved into smoke. By dawn, half the town was gone. Not burned, not destroyed, just taken, and the survivors knew, if they stayed, they'd be next. Fire. End of part 7. The curse is no longer just killing, it's swallowing Birmingham whole, dragging the town into a darker realm piece by piece. Next. Part 8. The Last Survivors. Part 8. The Last Survivors. Not everyone vanished. Not yet. But by the first week of September, Birmingham was no longer a town. It was a trap. The empty map. Travelers tried to find Birmingham but failed. On maps, the place still existed, printed in ink. But roads that should have led to it now twisted into swamps, dead ends, or thick forests that had never been there before. The few who did stumble into town found themselves circling endlessly, passing the same farmhouse, the same oak tree, over and over again, as if the land itself didn't want them to leave. Those who managed to get out told the same story. The town isn't just cursed. It's alive. The survivors, packed, only a handful of families remained, no more than 30 souls. They met every night in the half-faded church, candles flickering in the smoke, shadows moving like restless spirits across the cracked walls. Sheriff Dalton, his voice raw, stood at the front. If we don't leave soon, we'll all be taken. The town is vanishing. We've seen it. First the children, then the homes. Next, it will be us. Granny Harlow, old and bent but sharp as a blade, shook her head. You can't outrun what's beneath your feet. The mines follow you. The smoke follows you. You leave now, it will drag you down on the road. The room fell silent. Nobody knew which was worse, staying or fleeing. The schoolhouse horror. That night, screams tore through the quiet. The survivors rushed to the old schoolhouse. Inside, the walls were covered in soot, every chalkboard scrawled with names. Not children's handwriting. No, these were carved deep, like someone had scratched them with iron nails. The names were familiar. Every last one belonged to the survivors in that room. And as they watched, new letters burned into the board, slowly spelling out the sheriff's name. He dropped his lantern in shock. The flame caught, and for a moment, the walls glowed red, revealing the outline of dozens of shadowy figures standing in the corners, watching. When the light faded, they were gone. The woman in the smoke. The next evening, a young mother named Clara claimed she saw a woman standing in her doorway. The figure wore a dress of ash, her hair long and black as coal, her skin cracked and glowing faintly, like embers in a dying fire. She spoke in a voice that wasn't hers, but many voices together, layered and echoing. Your town was built on chains. Your debt is not paid. Then she reached out her hand, and before Clara could scream, her baby vanished from the crib. When the others arrived, all they found was a trail of soot leading into the street. The decision to escape, that broke the last of their resolve. The survivors decided to flee, no matter the risk. They packed wagons by lantern light, throwing in food, blankets, and Bibles. Sheriff Dalton nailed the church doors shut behind them. If the town wants to disappear, he muttered, let it vanish without us. But as the wagons rolled toward the edge of town, the smoke thickened, swallowing the road. Horses bucked and reared, children cried. From the black fog came the sound of chains dragging, moving closer. The bridge that wasn't. They reached the old wooden bridge at the river's edge. But where there had once been water, there was now only a black abyss, bottomless, endless, the air shimmering like heat over a furnace. The bridge still stretched across, swaying in the wind, but when the sheriff threw a stone, it didn't land. It fell forever. Keep moving, Dalton shouted, though his voice cracked with fear. One wagon made it across. Then another. But when the third wagon rolled onto the bridge, the boards split with a scream of wood and iron. The family inside tumbled into the darkness, their cries cut off instantly. The survivors pressed forward, too terrified to look back. The ash stormed. Once across, they thought they were free. But the smoke followed, rising high into the sky, turning into a storm of ash that rained down like snow. Every flake burned, every breath seared their lungs. The children sobbed as the storm closed around them. Through the swirling black, shapes appeared, miners, shackled and broken, their eyes glowing like coals. They reached for the living, their chains rattling, their mouths open in endless screams. One survivor, a farmer named Ellis, was dragged down, clawing at the dirt until only his hand remained, then that, too, was gone. The others ran, stumbling blind through the storm. The last sight of Birmingham. By dawn, the storm cleared. The survivors, what little was left of them, stood on a distant hill. Exhausted, burned, coughing up soot, but alive. They looked back. Birmingham was gone. No smoke, no rooftops, no sound of bells, just empty land, as though the town had never existed. Sheriff Dalton fell to his knees. His badge, once shining, was now blackened, the metal hot to the touch. Granny Harlow whispered, "It's not gone. It's waiting, buried deeper now." The others didn't answer. They just wept. For the town. For the families lost. For the curse that would never truly end. Fire. End of part 8. The survivors have escaped, but Birmingham itself has been erased, pulled into the abyss. Yet the curse still lingers, because debts written in blood never disappear. Next. Part 9, The Return of the Curse. Part 9, The Curse returns. You can bury a town. You can erase it from maps. But you can't bury a curse. And in 1921, nearly 40 years after Birmingham disappeared, the nightmare began again. A stranger's arrival. In the small town of Ash Hollow, 50 miles east, people whispered about a stranger who wandered in one summer night. He was barefoot, covered in soot, his eyes wild, and he carried nothing but a rusted miner's lantern. When asked where he'd come from, he answered with a voice cracked like burning wood. Birmingham. The townsfolk laughed at first. There ain't no Birmingham. But when they looked closer, the man's hands were chained at the wrists. Fresh, heavy, as if he had just been dragged from the earth. The forgotten survivors. Sheriff Dalton and the others who had escaped Birmingham long ago had tried to live normal lives. They scattered across states, changed their names, never spoke of what they saw. Some drank themselves into graves. Others went mad in silence. But the curse found them, one by one. Dalton's eldest daughter vanished in her sleep. His wife died coughing up soot. And when Dalton himself passed at 70, his body was so blackened that the undertaker refused to open the casket. The survivors had thought leaving Birmingham would save their children. They were wrong. Ash Hollow's trouble. By the second week of August, Ash Hollow began to change. The church bell tolled at midnight, though no one touched it. Children woke screaming, their small hands covered in coal dust. A black fog rolled in from the fields, thick enough to choke the cattle, leaving their bodies stiff and cold by morning. And then came the fires. Small at first, starting in barns, homes, even in people's cupboards. But the flames burned strangely, cold, smokeless, leaving behind only ash. The townsfolk whispered that Birmingham hadn't died. It had moved. The young historian, a schoolteacher named Emily Ward, became obsessed with the stories. She dug through old records, dusty courthouse ledgers, and yellowed newspapers. There it was. The 1883 headlines about the vanishing of Birmingham. She read survivor accounts, scribbled testimonies about black fog, disappearing families, and the woman of smoke. But one thing chilled her most: an old diary belonging to Clara, the young mother who had lost her baby. The final entry read, "Greater than, it follows. Not the town, but the debt. No matter where we go, it follows." Emily realized the truth. Ash Hollow was next. The return of the woman in smoke. That autumn night, Emily walked home from the schoolhouse, lantern in hand. The streets were empty, the air heavy. And then she saw her. The same figure from the diaries. A woman in a dress of ashes, eyes glowing faintly red, her body cracked like smoldering coal. Emily froze as the figure spoke, not one voice, but many, layered and hollow. "Your town rests on the backs of the forgotten. Their chains were not broken. Their debt was not paid." Before Emily could move, the woman reached out. Smoke poured from her hand, curling into Emily's chest. She collapsed in the dirt road, coughing black dust until her lantern went out. When neighbors found her, Emily's lips were gray, her lungs filled with ash. She was the first death. But not the last. The miners' march. Weeks later, townsfolk heard it. The clanging of picks and shovels, the dragging of chains, coming from beneath their feet. At night, they swore they saw men in miners' helmets, their faces hollow, their eyes like burning coal. One farmer tried to flee with his family. They made it 3 miles down the dirt road before his wagon overturned. His wife's last words were, "They're pulling us back." By morning, the wagon sat empty. Horses gone, family gone, only a black stain burned into the earth where they had stood. The burning well. The people of Ash Hollow gathered at the town well, desperate to draw water to fight the spreading fires. But when they lowered the bucket, it came back filled with boiling tar. The well itself began to smoke, the stones around it glowing red. Granny Harlow's grandson, one of the last living bloodlines of Birmingham, stepped too close. A hand of fire shot from the well, dragging him screaming into the blackness. The townsfolk sealed the well with heavy stones. But all night, they heard him screaming beneath their feet. The truth no one wanted. Emily's research spread like wildfire. The curse was never about Birmingham alone. It was about the land. The mines. The blood spilled when men were worked to death in chains and buried without graves. As long as the debt remained unpaid, the curse would move from town to town, swallowing lives, erasing maps, rewriting history. Ash Hollow was just another chapter. And it wasn't the last. The vanishing. By the first frost, Ash Hollow was empty. Families gone, homes left behind. Travelers passed through months later, confused when they found only open fields. Not a road, not a fence, not a single brick left behind. Like Birmingham before it, Ash Hollow had been swallowed whole. But some say, if you stand there at night, you'll hear the faint toll of a bell and the sound of chains rattling in the earth. The curse had moved again. Waiting for the next town. Fire. End of part 9. The curse has returned, moving to a new town, Ash Hollow. It cannot be escaped, only carried. Next. Part 10 The Final Reckoning. Part 10 The Final Reckoning. Some stories never end, they just change names. And tonight, you'll see why Birmingham's curse was never just about one town. The Last Witness. In 1952, nearly 70 years after Birmingham vanished and 30 after Ash Hollow followed it, an old woman sat alone in a hospital bed in Kentucky. Her name was Mary Dalton. She was the last living survivor of Birmingham, the sheriff's granddaughter. Mary had spent her life moving from place to place, never staying long, hoping to stay ahead of the curse. But no matter where she went, people around her grew sick, towns burned, and children disappeared in the night. Now she was 81, her body frail, her voice broken, but her mind sharp enough to carry the truth. Before she died, she told the nurse, "It isn't the towns that die. It's the people who forget them." The historian returns. Decades later, in 1975, a graduate student named Daniel Cross uncovered Mary Dalton's final words in a forgotten hospital log. Daniel had been obsessed with vanishing towns ever since he read about Birmingham in a footnote. Most dismissed him as crazy. But Daniel saw a pattern. Every 30 to 40 years, a community in the Midwest disappeared, leaving no trace. The last one had been Ash Hollow. And he believed the next would be his hometown, Coldwater, Ohio. The warning. Daniel begged the town council to listen. He showed them records, maps erased, graves left unmarked, diaries from Birmingham survivors. He told them about the woman in smoke. About the miners marching through cornfields at night. The mayor laughed him out of the room. Ghost stories don't scare Coldwater. But that night, the church bell rang 12 times at midnight. And no one was inside. The final haunting. The curse came faster this time. Cattle were found blackened, as if burned from the inside. Children woke screaming with soot in their lungs. And then, the mines, Coldwater had just opened a new one, collapsed without warning. No survivors. Only a deep pit in the earth, glowing faintly red. Daniel stood at the edge of that pit, clutching Mary Dalton's final note. It read, "The land remembers. The chains remember. And they will not rest until the debt is paid." The reckoning. Coldwater burned in a single night. Witnesses spoke of figures walking out of the fire, miners in shackles, faces cracked like burning coal. They didn't attack. They simply marched through the streets, dragging chains, heading west. At their center was the woman of smoke. Her voice was 1,000 voices, crying at once. Daniel confronted her in the town square. His voice trembled, but he shouted, "Why us? Why every town?" The woman stopped, her head tilted, eyes glowing like embers. Because America was built on chains. And the dead were never freed. Daniel dropped to his knees. The ground split beneath him. The curse didn't just want lives. It wanted memory. And Coldwater, like Birmingham and Ash Hollow before it, was erased. The final note. Today, Coldwater doesn't appear on any map. Ask locals about it, and they'll shrug, as if it never existed. But some nights, truckers driving through Ohio swear they see lights in the fields, hear the toll of a bell, and catch the faint smell of burning coal. They say the curse still marches west, searching for its next victim. And maybe, just maybe, your town is next. Fire. End of part 10 The Final Reckoning. That's the end of the Iron Curse of Birmingham. A horror story about history refusing to stay buried. Right finger if you enjoyed this chilling journey. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave a comment about the scariest part for you. Your support keeps these haunted tales alive. And remember, some stories don't die. They're just waiting for the next town.